You slept last night, probably 7 or 8 hours. You have a mattress that costs several $100s, a pillow designed by someone with a degree in ergonomics, a room with blackout curtains, climate control set to exactly the temperature you prefer, and possibly an app on your phone tracking your sleep cycles and telling you how well you rested. And you woke up tired, not slightly tired, not just need a coffee tired, the kind of tired that accumulates, the kind that has been accumulating for years. Your prehistoric ancestor slept on the ground. No mattress, no pillow, no door, no climate control. The temperature dropped through the night. There were predators within a kilometer. The ground was hard. And they slept better than you. Not marginally better. Not arguably better. Measurably, scientifically, documentably better. In ways that researchers studying living hunter-gatherer communities have now confirmed across multiple continents. Using instruments that measure actual sleep architecture. Not self-reported guesses. That is not a wellness claim. That is not someone trying to sell you something made of lavender. That is what the data says. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why and exactly what broke. Subscribe now, because this one is going to make you look at your bedroom differently. Act 1. Before the mattress. Let us be specific about how your prehistoric ancestor actually slept. Not vague, not romanticized. Specific. Before fire, which we covered in the last video, your ancestor slept in trees. This is not a metaphor. The skeletal morphology of early Homo erectus shows shoulder joints and wrist structures adapted for overhead gripping and climbing. Features that persist well past the point where they would be necessary if humans were sleeping on the ground. Evolution does not maintain unnecessary features. If the skeleton is still built for climbing, the body is still climbing. Every night at dusk, your ancestor went up. Because the ground at night belonged to things that wanted to eat them. Because altitude was the only protection available. Because there were no walls, no doors, no locks, just height. And then fire changed everything, including where they slept. We covered this in the last video, but the sleep implication is worth pausing on. The campfire was not just warmth and cooked food. The campfire was the first technology that made sleeping on the ground safe. For the first time in the existence of the species, humans could lie down on the earth at night and not be eaten. This was not a small thing. Think about what it does to sleep quality. When the baseline anxiety of the night, the managed survival situation that every night had been, simply disappears. You lie down. You are warm. You are surrounded by the people you trust. Someone is watching the fire. The predators are staying back. Your nervous system, for the first time in 200,000 years of evolution, gets to fully relax. That is the sleep your body was designed to have. Now let us talk about what it actually looked like. Your ancestor did not sleep 8 hours straight. This is one of the most important things the research has established, and one of the most misunderstood facts about human sleep biology. The idea that humans should sleep 8 consecutive hours, in one unbroken block, from roughly 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., is not a biological norm. It is an industrial norm. It emerged from the factory schedule, from the electric light bulb, from the standardization of working hours in the 19th century. Before all of that, the evidence suggests something different. References to a first sleep and second sleep appear throughout European historical writing. Before the Industrial Revolution, people would sleep for several hours after dark, wake naturally in the middle of the night, lie awake for an hour or two, sometimes talking, sometimes reading by candlelight, sometimes simply thinking, and then sleep again until dawn. This pattern has a name: biphasic sleep. 2 sleep periods in one night with a natural waking interval between them. And it is not just historical. In 2015, sleep researcher Jerome Siegel and his team published a landmark study measuring sleep patterns in 3 hunter-gatherer communities living without electricity: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia and Botswana, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. 3 different continents, 3 completely different environments, no contact with each other, all measured with wrist actigraphy, objective sleep data, not self-report. What they found was consistent across all 3 groups. Average sleep duration, between 5.7 and 7.1 hours, less than the 8 hours doctors currently recommend. But the quality metrics were strikingly different from modern populations. Near 0 rates of insomnia, rapid sleep onset, falling asleep, on average, within 17 minutes. High sleep efficiency, the proportion of time in bed actually spent asleep, and a consistent pattern of sleep timing. They fell asleep roughly 2 to 3 hours after sunset and woke shortly after sunrise. Their sleep was governed not by alarm clocks or work schedules, but by temperature. The ambient temperature of their environment dropped through the evening, reached its lowest point in the early morning hours, and began rising again after dawn. And their sleep tracked that curve almost perfectly. They fell asleep as the temperature dropped. They slept most deeply during the coldest part of the night. They woke as the temperature began to rise. Their bodies were using environmental temperature as a sleep signal. A signal that is built into human biology, that has been built into human biology for hundreds of thousands of years, and that the modern bedroom has almost completely eliminated. We will come back to that. But first, the other thing Siegel's team found that nobody talks about enough. The hunter-gatherer communities in this study almost never slept alone. Sleep in these communities was a group activity. Multiple people in close physical proximity, body heat shared. The sounds of other people breathing, moving, settling. Someone always awake or semi-awake near the fire. This is not a social choice. This is not a preference. This is 200,000 years of how human sleep actually evolved. The human nervous system developed in an environment where sleeping alone meant danger, where the absence of other bodies nearby was a signal that something had gone wrong, where the sounds of a group, breathing, shifting, occasional movement, were the sounds of safety. Modern humans sleep in individual beds, in individual rooms, in silence, and then wonder why their nervous systems will not fully relax. Act 2. The science of prehistoric sleep. Let us go deeper into what the research actually says. Jerome Siegel's 2015 study, published in Current Biology, is worth understanding in detail because it directly contradicts several things that have been presented as established sleep science for decades. The first thing it overturns: the 8-hour recommendation. The hunter-gatherer communities in the study averaged between 5.7 and 7.1 hours of sleep, not 8. But here is the critical distinction. These communities showed essentially no clinical insomnia, no difficulty falling asleep, no difficulty staying asleep, no waking at 3 a.m. with racing thoughts, no lying in bed for an hour before sleep onset. In modern populations, insomnia affects between 10 and 30% of adults, depending on how it is measured. In the studied hunter-gatherer communities, the researchers found rates approaching 0. This is not because these populations had easier lives. The Hadza face food uncertainty, physical danger, disease, and social stress. Their lives are not less stressful than a suburban office worker's. The difference is not stress level. The difference is sleep architecture. Their sleep was governed by biological signals. Ours is governed by schedules, screens, and the belief that we should be asleep at a specific time, whether or not our biology agrees. The second thing the research overturns: the role of temperature. Your body temperature drops naturally through the evening as part of the circadian preparation for sleep. Core body temperature needs to fall by approximately 1 to 2 degrees Celsius to initiate and maintain deep sleep. This is not a preference. It is a physiological requirement. Hunter-gatherer sleepers experience this temperature drop naturally. T is matched by the ambient environment cooling after sunset. Their internal temperature signal and their external environment are synchronized. Modern sleepers live in climate-controlled environments, where the temperature remains constant 24 hours a day. The external temperature signal is gone. The body still produces the internal temperature drop, but without the environmental reinforcement, the signal is weaker. Sleep onset takes longer. Deep sleep is shallower. The architecture of the night is disrupted. The third thing: light. Human melatonin production is triggered by darkness. Specifically, by the absence of short wavelength light, the blue end of the spectrum, roughly 400 to 480 nanometers. For the entirety of human evolution until 1879, the only artificial light available after dark was fire. Firelight is warm spectrum light, long wavelengths, orange and red. It does not significantly suppress melatonin. Your prehistoric ancestor could sit by a campfire for hours after dark without meaningfully disrupting their sleep biology. The light from a smartphone screen is a different matter entirely. Modern screens emit substantial blue light. Exposure to screen light in the hour before sleep suppresses melatonin production by up to 50% and delays sleep onset by approximately 45 minutes. Your ancestors spent every evening looking at fire. You spend every evening looking at a screen. Both emit light. The biological consequences are completely different. Act 3. 3 things that broke your sleep. Your bedroom has more sleep technology in it than any human in history has ever had access to. And your sleep is worse. Here is why. 3 things, 3 specific identifiable things, broke the human sleep system. Each one arrived at a different point in history. Each one solved a real problem. Each one had a side effect that nobody calculated. Thing 1, the Liber bulb, October 21, 1879. Thomas Edison's laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey. A carbon filament burns in a vacuum for 14.5 hours. It was one of the most consequential demonstrations in human history. Within a decade, electric lighting was through. Within 50 years, it had reached most of the industrialized world. Within a century, darkness, genuine complete darkness after sunset, had become something you had to seek out. For the first time in 200,000 years of human existence, the night was no longer dark. The melatonin signal weakened. Sleep onset shifted later. The circadian clock, calibrated over hundreds of thousands of years to the rhythms of the natural light cycle, began drifting. And nobody noticed because the disruption was gradual. And because the benefits were obvious and the costs were invisible. You cannot see your melatonin suppression. You can see the light. The light bulb is not the villain of this story. It is an extraordinary technology that extended human productive hours, reduced accident rates, civilization. But it had a cost, and the cost was paid in sleep. Thing 2. The thermostat. The ability to control indoor temperature year-round is even more recent than electric lighting. Widespread residential air conditioning in the United States did not occur until the 1950s and 1960s. Before air conditioning, summer nights were hot. Winter nights were cold. The temperature in your sleeping environment varied with the season and the time of night. Your body used that variation as information. The natural temperature drop of an autumn or winter evening, the cool air coming through an open window, the gradual chill settling into the room, was a reliable external signal that reinforced the internal circadian process of preparing the body for sleep. Modern climate control eliminated that signal. The thermostat keeps the bedroom at a constant temperature, typically between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 24 hours a day, 12 months a year. There is no evening temperature drop. There is no signal. The body produces the internal temperature decrease on its own, but without environmental reinforcement. The process is less reliable. Sleep onset is slower, and deep sleep is shallower. Sleep scientists now recommend keeping the bedroom between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler than most people set their thermostats, specifically to replicate the environmental temperature drop that human sleep biology evolved to require. Your ancestor did not need this recommendation. The night provided it automatically. Thing 3. Sleeping alone. This one is the most uncomfortable. The sleep industry is built on individual sleep optimization, individual mattresses, individual pillows, individual sleep trackers, individual white noise machines so you do not disturb your partner. The entire framework assumes that better sleep is achieved by more perfectly isolating the individual sleeper from any external disturbance. The research suggests this assumption may be precisely backwards. A 2023 study published in the journal Sleep found that couples who slept in the same bed showed significantly better sleep architecture than couples who slept separately, despite the objective sleep disturbances caused by another person's movement. The subjective quality was better. The REM sleep was higher. The stress markers were lower. The researchers proposed that the presence of another person, their warmth, their sounds, their proximity, activates an ancient biological reassurance system. A signal that says, you are not alone, the group is intact, it is safe to sleep deeply. Hunter-gatherer communities sleep in close physical groups. Multiple people, children between adults, bodies touching or nearly touching. The sounds of shared breathing. This is not because they lack privacy. This is because human sleep biology developed in exactly this environment and is, at some fundamental level, still calibrated for it. You have a room to yourself, you have silence, you have perfect darkness, and your nervous system is quietly waiting for the sounds of the group that never come. Act 4. Sleep across civilizations. Here is what is interesting. Every major civilization in history has at some point noticed that humans sleep badly, not just recently, not just since smartphones. The problem is old. The responses are illuminating. Rome. Insomnia appears in Roman medical and literary texts with striking regularity. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century c., dedicated significant attention to sleep remedies, including lettuce, which he described as having soporific properties. He was not wrong. Lactuca virosa contains compounds that have mild sedative effects. The Roman physician Galen, whose medical framework dominated Western medicine for over 1,000 years, wrote extensively about sleep disorders and their relationship to diet, exercise, and mental state. More striking is the case of Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, a man whose meditations remain one of the most widely read philosophical texts in human history. Marcus Aurelius was an insomniac. He relied on theriac, a compound that included opium, to sleep. He wrote about the difficulty of getting out of bed in the mornings. He noted the temptation to stay under the covers when the day ahead seemed overwhelming. The most powerful man in the Roman world could not sleep without drugs. 2,000 years ago, before screens, before electric light, before the modern world, the Roman experience suggests that the disruption of sleep is not purely a technological problem. It is also a social one. A civilization that runs on ambition, status competition, and anxiety produces insomniacs, regardless of the technology available. China. Traditional Chinese medicine has a sophisticated framework for sleep that predates the Roman Empire. The concept of wuye, the 5 periods of the night, divided nighttime into segments with distinct physiological significance. Certain hours were associated with specific organ systems. Sleep disruption at particular times of night was interpreted as a signal about specific organ imbalances. Whether or not you accept the framework, the observation underlying it is real. People wake at different times for different reasons, and the pattern of waking tells you something about the underlying cause. Chinese medicine also gave us the concept of the afternoon rest, what is now called the wu shui, or midday sleep. This is not a cultural preference. It is a biological observation. Human alertness follows a biphasic pattern through the day, a post-lunch dip in core body temperature, and alertness that occurs regardless of what you ate for lunch. It is not caused by food. It is caused by the same circadian rhythm that governs nighttime sleep. Your body wants to rest briefly in the early afternoon. This is not laziness. This is biology. Chinese civilization recognized it and accommodated it. Most modern workplaces do not. Japan gives us one of the most culturally fascinating sleep phenomena in the modern world. Inemuri, a Japanese word that translates approximately as sleeping while present, refers to the practice of sleeping in public spaces, on the subway, in meetings, at one's desk. In most Western contexts, falling asleep in a meeting is a professional catastrophe. In Japan, inemuri is traditionally interpreted as evidence of someone who has worked so hard that their body simply could not stay awake. It is, paradoxically, a status signal. The person sleeping in the meeting is not someone who does not care. They are someone who cared so much about something else that they exhausted themselves. What is interesting here is not the cultural norm itself, but what it reveals about the underlying biology. Humans fall asleep when they are sleep deprived. This is not a failure of discipline. It is a physiological fact. The question is not whether sleep deprivation produces involuntary sleep onset. It does. Always. In every population. The question is what story a culture tells about that moment. Japan built a story that preserved dignity. Most other cultures built a story that assigned shame. The biology is the same. Spain and the Mediterranean. The siesta is one of the most misunderstood practices in the world. It is frequently described as laziness, as a cultural artifact of warm climates, as something that modern efficiency has rightfully phased out. It is none of these things. The siesta is the oldest form of biphasic sleep still practiced at scale, a direct remnant of the natural human sleep pattern that Jerome Siegel's research confirmed in hunter-gatherer communities. The early afternoon temperature rise, the post-lunch circadian dip, the body's genuine biological desire to rest. These are not Spanish inventions. They are human universals. Spain and the Mediterranean simply built a civilization that accommodated them. The modern world decided to eliminate the siesta in the name of productivity. The result, in countries that phased it out, has been measurable increases in cardiovascular disease. A 37% increase in coronary mortality was documented in Greece following the elimination of the afternoon rest. The siesta was not inefficient. It was physiologically protective. And the decision to eliminate it was made without understanding what it was actually doing. The modern mythology of sleep deprivation. Margaret Thatcher famously slept 4 hours a night and considered it sufficient. Elon Musk has described 6 hours as adequate and suggested that anyone who thinks they need more is probably not working hard enough. The startup culture of the early 21st century elevated sleep deprivation to a virtue. Sleeping less was evidence of ambition. Sleeping 8 hours was evidence of mediocrity. The neuroscience of sleep is unambiguous on this point. Sleep deprivation below 7 hours is associated with impaired prefrontal cortex function, reduced emotional regulation, increased cortisol, impaired immune function, increased amyloid beta accumulation in the brain, the same protein associated with Alzheimer's disease, and significantly elevated risk of cardiovascular disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. No amount of discipline compensates for these effects. Margaret Thatcher developed Alzheimer's disease. This is not proof that sleep deprivation caused it, but it is not nothing. Act 5. The plot twist. Here is where we have to be honest. Your prehistoric ancestor slept better than you. The evidence for this is real. The mechanisms are understood. The comparison is legitimate. And your prehistoric ancestor died, on average, before the age of 40. Not because their sleep was bad. Because of infection. Because of injury. Because of childbirth. Because of parasites. Because of predation. Because of drought and famine. Because every single thing that the modern world has built, antibiotics, vaccines, surgery, sanitation, food security, rule of law, emergency medicine, none of it existed. So let us be precise about what we are comparing. Your ancestor had a nervous system calibrated by evolution for the environment they lived in. Their sleep biology worked. Their sleep was synchronized with the natural world. Their bodies were doing exactly what 200,000 years of selection had optimized them to do. And they died young anyway. Because sleep quality was not the limiting factor on their lifespan. Violence was, infection was, accident was, starvation was. You live in a world that has solved most of those problems. Infections that killed half of all children in the pre-modern world are now treated with a 3-day course of antibiotics. The causes of death that ended your ancestor's life at 35 are, for most people in developed countries, no longer the primary threat. The threats that are killing modern humans, chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, are significantly associated with sleep disruption. Your ancestor died from what the ancient world could do to them. You are dying from what the modern world is doing to you. Both are real. Both are worth taking seriously. The difference is that the ancient threats are largely solved. The modern threats are largely self-inflicted. And among the most self-inflicted of all is the systematic dismantling of the sleep architecture that 200,000 years of evolution built. You have everything your ancestor did not have. Except the thing that was always free: a dark room, a cool temperature, people nearby, and the time to actually rest. That is not a wellness prescription. That is just evolutionary biology asking to be taken seriously. Your prehistoric ancestor lay down on the ground tonight. The fire was warm. The group was close. The stars were visible. Someone was telling a story. They did not have a mattress. They did not have melatonin supplements. They did not have a white noise machine. They fell asleep in 17 minutes. They slept until the temperature rose. They woke up without an alarm. They had no concept of insomnia, not because the word did not exist, but because the condition barely existed. If that changed how you think about your bedroom, the like button is right there. Next video. We are going further into the body your ancestor built, how they moved, how far they walked, what their muscles were actually designed for, and what happens to a body built for constant movement when it sits in a chair for 8 hours a day. The movement hypothesis. It drops next week. Subscribe so you do not miss it.